We never demand. We never, as you said, like try to push something away. It's always like in conversation with a lot of respect.
Welcome to the Shift Within podcast. I'm your host, Alice. I'm from the Inner Shift Institute, and I'm here to guide you on a journey inside of your mind. Our podcast is a platform for catalyzing both inner and outer shifts using the power of psychedelics and powerful therapeutic tools. Welcome to your new beginning. Welcome to your new life. Welcome to the Shift Within podcast. Our podcast is all about exploring the mysteries of the subconscious mind, the body-mind connection, and all things psychedelic. And today I want to introduce you to Melissa, which is a highly valued member of our team at the Inner Shift Institute. And Melissa is also an internal family systems, IFS in short, practitioner. She has done level 2. And today we're going to be talking together about how IFS can be integrated into the psychedelic experience and how we at the Inner Shift Institute are bringing in elements of IFS into the psychedelic journey itself. So maybe to start, Melissa, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an IFS practitioner and a psychedelic practitioner?
So yeah, I think I've been having experience for like 15 years with psychedelics and entheogens. I started with ayahuasca and then kind of got into the whole medicine world with peyote, San Pedro, and first gained like a lot of personal experience. And then so naturally, also because I was giving retreats, like working with the Vision Quest, people naturally started asking me to guide them on journeys, because especially like, about 10 years ago, there were not so many practitioners offering this. And because people would feel a good connection with me, they would just ask me without me offering it. And so that's just how it started. But then along the way, I really noticed that even though I have good intuition and good skills of working with people, that I was missing the therapeutic component. I was receiving a lot of people with trauma and more, heavier, complex problems. And I really wanted to help them. So then I started looking into other modalities that I could learn more therapeutically. Because I was already coaching people and doing healing work and giving more energetic readings. But for me, the component of the therapeutic work I noticed was really missing for myself with my clients, but also in all the work that I'd done myself, right? Because I've been working with so many different medicine people, practitioners. I've been a lot to Peru and Ecuador, Mexico, to work also with indigenous elders. And so for me, really the component of having an understanding of how the psyche works, how our nervous system works, was something I really wanted to learn about. And so then I came across internal family systems therapy. And that for me was like such a huge connection. It really clicked for me. And so first I went into IFS therapy myself. And that made such a huge change in the understanding of myself, like working with trauma that was coming to surface. And so then when I was learning IFS, for me, it was like nearly like a love story, It's like really something clicked within me deeply. And so, yeah, I really love using this with my clients also.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I also really love IFS. I feel like when we understand the concept of IFS, it just makes sense.
Yes.
Can you explain it in your words? And I might also add something that I have understood because I'm also IFS trained. Can you explain it to people in a simple way what the IFS model is?
Yeah. So IFS really recognizes that our mind is multiple. So we have different facets, kind of like a diamond, right? There's one diamond, but there's different facets to us. And I think a lot of theories say that we should have like unitary consciousness where we have to think, feel, and act the same way, that we always have to be congruent. And I think this, what I've experienced is not true. We have different facets of us, different qualities that come up at certain moments. So we call them parts. And so these different parts, they come in at certain moments of the day, at different, like at the social situation, at a work situation, and they both carry our qualities, but they also carry burdens, and they carry problematic behavior. And the more these parts are out of balance or out of alignment with each other, the more they kind of start fighting each other. And so this is where our internal system becomes more dysregulated. Our nervous system becomes more dysregulated. And what we do with IFS and is like talking to these different parts, finding out what they need, what their intention is. And also, for me, what is like the big game changer, because there's more modalities that work with parts, right? But for me, an IFS is really learning about the relationship that these parts have with each other and with ourself. But having that relationship and understanding that one part cannot change without the other, because they either complement each other or they are sometimes in conflict with each other. So that means that if one part would move or start changing behavior or thoughts, that means that the other part would be out of balance. And so it's really about that relation that we have internally and improving the relationship that we have to these different parts. So it's changing the relationship internally. And this is how we create more internal safety. This is how we create more internal collaboration. And that's why it's so effective for me.
Thank you so much for explaining. Yeah, for me, it's also like I feel like it gives you this inner sense of understanding and having compassion for yourself when you have like, because so often we want to get rid of something, or we feel like, oh, I one of my parts is pulling me in the right direction, but the other direction is the wrong direction. And like, why can I not stop scrolling on my phone? Like, why am I doing these things? And then with IFS, you really look at the part in you that is scrolling on the phone. Yes. And is this a part that is maybe a wounded part of yourself, or is it a part that wants to protect you from something? And so you create this relationship with this part, so you can really create understanding and have compassion and approach everything in you with curiosity instead of going against what's happening in you. And this curiosity creates that inner safety that you're talking about, right? And yes. And so that's why I really resonate with this approach so much, and it works so well. I see it working with our clients and the people that we guide through, because it creates us that feeling of not feeling shame for, like, not being shamed for anything, right? So like in the middle of a ceremony or in the middle of a session, a client can just say, I'm really bored right now. And then it's absolutely okay. It's not, there's nothing that, like, as a therapist, we will then also look at this with curiosity, right? Like, oh, there's a part coming up that's bored right now. Okay, let's understand more why this part is bored. And so that's why I think it's so beautiful, because it really dismantles this paradigm of shame that we have experienced, right, growing up. Like with the inner shift method, we use the IFS also in the psychedelic ceremony itself, because there's a lot of talk about should it be used just for the preparation and the integration, or can it also be used in the middle of the ceremony? Can you maybe share some experience, like what is your experience and why do you use it in the middle of ceremony too?
So I think it's an amazing tool, especially to use during ceremony. And of course, it's amazing for preparation and integration. And I know a lot of people who work with psychedelics, they say you should not interfere too much during a session itself. But my experience really is to use it as a tool, and of course still be sensitive always to see where someone is and not to be intrusive. But for example, what happens very often is that, the mushrooms take its effect and the person can't really feel or notice yet what's going on. So it feels kind of like there's a blockage or there's some dissociation taking place. And then working with the inner system and finding out what is needed to be able to accept the full effect of the mushrooms. Or, if there's any hesitation, if there's any anxiety going on. So we work with that first. And for example, I had a client yesterday where that's exactly what happened. He actually told me, he's like, well, I might not have an effect because I did already 3 ceremonies and it didn't really have an effect. And he took a really high dose. So knowing that, I started the session with really looking for parts that might be controlling or that might not be confident with letting go of control or, to fully experience. And so we found this part that was really like controlling the entire system. It knows that even though it cannot have full control over the other parts, because all of the parts can still exert their will. But this part was like, okay, I need to make sure that everyone kind of stays in their place, in their lane. And it didn't even realize that it had such a big effect on the system by diminishing. Because I asked this part, it was like, so were you in control last time of diminishing the effect? And he was like, I don't know, maybe. I didn't do that on purpose. And so working with this part and asking this part to relax a little bit and just observe what could happen if the client would feel the effects of the mushrooms. Because there's like often negotiation taking place, right? It's like, what do you need to feel more comfortable to like relax, step back, change a certain behavior. Like we never demand. We never, like, as you said, like try to push something away. It's always like in conversation with a lot of respect. And so once this part was ready to let go of control, like within, I think 2 minutes, the client started feeling the effect. So it's real. It's really it's powerful and it's noticeable just straight in a moment. And so just for that, it's a great tool. But then also during the entire session, often a client goes places and there's resistance. And so really being able to help kind of stay on a certain track that is in alignment with the intention of the session. And always in a really respectful, kind, compassionate way. So therefore, for me, it's a missed opportunity sometimes if you don't have a guide that can help you in that way.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you, because what would have happened in the if you hadn't used the IFS model, the parts work to getting to know the system of the client, is that he would have just not had another experience and nothing would have happened. Yeah. And so it's sometimes really important to interfere as a therapist and not just have the psychedelic facilitator be there as just the sitter and to not do anything. And there were so many moments I can share as well where like people are very anxious, they're very fearful, and then working with these parts in the ceremony can bring so much safety, can bring so much relief, and it can actually also really help them heal the trauma. Because if you do IFS without psychedelics, you can do wonderful things, but combined with the psychedelics, you can go so much deeper, and the parts they speak. Mm-hmm. And the client has so much more access to the parts as well when they're on psychedelics, right? Yeah. And so combining the two can be so powerful, right? What would you say is the most surprising thing that you have learned from combining IFS with psychedelics?
One is that people take it on so naturally. It makes so much sense, right? And people might be a little bit hesitant towards the terminology of IFS when they're not on mushrooms. And then on mushrooms, it just makes sense. Because also it becomes more visual, so they can see the parts more easily. Because it's an enhanced experience, we have a heightened state of consciousness. So these parts, they become more alive. And I think therefore it just works so well, because people are like, yes, of course, this part, and it looks like this. And it works a lot with the imaginary, but also how the part wants to be seen. So this collaboration all of a sudden is enforced. And I think also because the default mode network is deactivated and more neural pathways are possible, it's easier, or there's less resistance to the idea of having different parts and what they might look like, and that they might be, in the body. Because that's like somatically, when you're not on mushrooms and you say like, okay, where do you feel this? And they're like, it's in my shoulder. And when you tell them, well, maybe you can ask what there is, or, what story it wants to tell you. And then people go like, well, I can't ask my shoulder that. But when they're on mushrooms, all of a sudden it makes so much sense. Like, of course I can ask my shoulder, or of course there's, a part and it looks like this. Like the imagery is easier.
Exactly. The parts appear and show themselves so much easier, because
Yes.
if they can't tune into the shoulder like that, there is a part that is blocking them because they say it's nonsense, right? So
Yes.
it makes it harder. And on mushrooms, it is just such a real experience.
Yes.
That if you as a facilitator ask a question, the answer just appears and is so visual and is so clear that it makes sense, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Do you have a story of your own? It could be on psychedelics or not on psychedelics, but where the IFS parts work has really helped shift something in your life?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things is that when I started with IFS, is that I started to get an idea that I had trauma that I didn't know about, because of the way I was responding in certain situations. Even just psychedelics alone never helped me to get there, because there was so much resistance within my system. And because up to that point I had done, I don't know, maybe 40 ayahuasca ceremonies, and none of this trauma had ever come up. It had come up in body sensations and fear and loneliness and despair even, in sessions. And then always there was this lingering feeling of like, there's something wrong with me. I can feel it, but I can't access it. And so when I started going into IFS therapy, one, I noticed, and I didn't know that, I thought I was always really rapidly catching up on things, and I would go deep really fast. But then I noticed that my system actually needs a lot more time to feel safe and to feel relaxed. And that a lot of therapies that I was doing, such as breath work, where I would dive in really deep into, like trauma states, that was not good for me, because I wasn't feeling safe internally yet. And so creating that safety, I always like say is with IFS, is like you start at a base layer, and then you create safety among all the different parts there. And then you can drop just a little bit lower, and you start working with all the parts there, create safety. And then every time you can drop a little bit lower until you go to the root cause of problematic behavior or depression, anxiety, and these kinds of things, right? And so one, it was surprising to me that it took me so long to create that safety. But then once I finally found that internal safety, I got a lot of memories of trauma that I had completely suppressed. And so finally, after maybe 15, nearly 20 years of doing a lot of internal work, I finally was able to resolve this trauma and really process it, really integrate it in a way that was safe, that felt respectful to my system, and in a way that was long-lasting. Because before that, I used to have a lot of nightmares. I was unable to sleep. Dealing with a lot of fears and anxieties. and also with dissociation. And so once I kind of got to that internal safety and was really able to work on my trauma, like all of that started to resolve. Of course, it still took some time, but now I sleep amazing. I don't have nightmares anymore. I can enjoy life so much more.
That's really amazing. I'm
Yeah.
so happy. I'm so happy that you went through this process and that you can enjoy life more. And
Yeah.
that's what we all want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also that's why we do this work, right? Because we've experienced so much and we know that it's possible to heal and to improve and to even come out of like a really deep, dark hole.
Yeah.
And so we want to share that with other people, that that's possible, and we can help them with that.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, it was I when I was in my 20s, used to have a depression. And I tried everything, like even though I was depressed, I knew somewhere deep in my mind, I still had a part that knew I'm not going to give up. I'm going to find something that's going to help me. And so I tried out all the different modalities that you can imagine. And I think you have also tried many of those,
Yes.
right? And I ended up finding psychedelics and IFS. And these were just the two things that I stuck with because they helped me the most. The IFS to create that internal safety, and the psychedelics to give me like a little edge to go deeper, right? And then the combination of the two was just so absolutely transforming that I really managed to learn everything I could about the different parts that were causing my depression. And there was not just one depressed part. There were lots of different, there was such a big interplay of so many different parts that didn't want to let me feel, of parts that were like really, they're like an inner judge, being judgmental, parts that were holding core beliefs, like wounded parts that felt like they were alone, didn't belong anywhere, not enough. And so going there, meeting all these parts, taking care of the wounded parts in the system, softening the protector parts by listening to them was really life-changing for me. And today I experience basically no more symptoms of depression. Sometimes like a little bit here and there, but as soon as something comes, I go in with curiosity because that's what I learned from the IFS model and generally also inner child work, to meet everything inside with curiosity, even the inner judge, everything. And that in itself has created so much inner safety that my life has just become so much more enjoyable, right?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So would you say that when you guide people on psychedelic journeys that you have specific parts that come up specifically in the psychedelic journey more than in a normal IFS session?
Do you mean for clients?
Yes.
It also reminded me because we all have parts, right? I also have parts that sometimes come up during the session, and I work at the same time with my own parts.
Yes.
Because we have helper parts, for example, that come up during the session that I really want the session to go well. And so I also have to ask that part to come and sit next to me for a little bit, so we can be more in self. What comes up a lot with clients is an inner critic, like a really heavy inner critic that doesn't allow the person to enjoy. That's always keeping a score of what someone's doing wrong, for example. I see that a lot, especially with very depressed clients. But also, there's often coming like a skeptic part. There's like, why am I doing this? Is this okay? Because also sometimes like societal things come up, right? It's like all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm doing drugs. Is that the right thing to do? And so then we always like acknowledge that part. And we're like, of course you have this thought coming up, and that's okay. And so we just work with that part and make sure that part feels content and easy or at ease to continue with the session. Yeah.
Yes. I find that in the sessions also with psychedelics, the wounded parts show themselves a lot more than if you have a regular IFS session. I think the protector parts might show themselves more protecting the wounded parts, and in a psychedelic ceremony I find that the protector parts often, not always, but often step away more to let the wounded parts emerge, so that we can actually look at the root and release the burdens that these wounded parts in us have been carrying. Would you say you've made that same experience?
Yes, I think because the nature of the mushrooms allow us to have more compassion and kindness. So, what you're saying is also my experience, that the parts, like the protective parts, they feel easier seen and at ease, and allow wounded parts, like child parts, to come up easier. And then what I often notice, what happens at first, is that the client kind of goes into the wounded part. And so it starts expressing the fears or the shame, like really going into it. And that is because often these child parts, they really want to show what they've been dealing with, like what they have experienced for such a long time. So that really is an opportunity to witness the experience of that inner child, the wounded child, and to be able to heal it, to integrate it.
Great. And before we were actually skipped to this question, you were talking about when you're in a psychedelic ceremony, sometimes you have a helper part that comes in, and then you ask it to step back to have more self be present. Can you explain more about the self? Because that's the part that we haven't talked about yet, and it's a big part of the IFS work and world.
Yeah, so the self is our essence, like our essential energy that is always there. It's not a part. And it's what connects us to all the other parts, and also to kind of everything around us, right? It's that is also bigger than us. And this self is ideally governing the system, because the self is kind, it's compassionate, it's creative. It has a lot more freedom, patience, and all the good qualities that we often wish to have. But because of the protective parts, when they have an experience that self was not present or was not capable of managing a difficult situation, the protective parts take over, and they kind of hide and suppress the self. And sometimes even believing that there is no self. So what we do is, like, we work with these different parts to allow them to relax more, so the self can come forth. And you can really feel the difference between a part. For example, if you have a part that's very anxious, we can actually feel anxious. You maybe feel like your stomach clenching. And the moment that that part can relax and separate from you, and self starts coming forward. And sometimes you need to separate a lot of different parts before you get there. And then when self comes forward, you can actually feel a lot of confidence, a lot of calm. And once the parts start to get to know the self, they naturally have more trust that there is something else bigger than them who is more capable of managing the system. And then it's a collaboration always, of course, because the parts are still necessary. It's like we don't want to get rid of the parts. We just want to get into a better relationship with them, so they can start behaving in ways that are more beneficial for the system.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's really important that, like, we approach everything with just creating a relationship and not want to get rid of anything, because anytime that we want to get rid of anything, we're rejecting something in us, and that inner rejection is just gonna make that part scream a lot louder and make itself stronger, right? And that's why we always say, when people come to us and they say my intention for the psychedelic experience is I want to get rid of my depression. We helped them to rephrase it, because it's all about really creating that inner relationship, creating that understanding, creating that compassion, and finding out why is the depression there in the first place and what is there. And yeah, can we meet that need? Can we release that feeling? But it is can never come from an energy of wanting to get rid of something, right? Yeah. What's been one of the most rewarding aspects for you in combining IFS with psychedelic therapy?
For me personally, in my own journey, it just really helped to have more like self-love and self-compassion and understanding why I do certain things. For example, being very perfectionistic always seemed to be like a good thing, but it's been very debilitating also. And so just looking at that with more compassion now, I can be more creative. For example, I'm also working construction and designing. And so kind of being more relaxed about how things go give me a lot less stress, but it also allows me to be, because I'm more kind to myself, I can be more kind to other people. Because I used to get, it's embarrassing to say, I used to get a little bit mean to other people when I felt that they wouldn't do the right thing, or they, weren't able to get the quality that I wanted them from them. And so for me is that a lot of people talk about self-love, right? Like you have to have self-love, like, love yourself more, be more kind to yourself, be more compassionate. But then a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do that because I've never experienced that. And when you haven't experienced something, it's really difficult to know what that means or what that feels like, what that looks like. And because of the structure of IFS and always finding the self and be in relationship from self to a part, and then there's naturally kindness and compassion. It just emerges, like, because all of a sudden you understand certain behavior or the intention of a part. So naturally you're just more loving and more compassionate and more kind towards these different parts. And I think that is, for me, with psychedelics combined, it's really like, I always call it like a bit of a laboratory or an experimental ground where you get to experience emotions and feelings and sensations that you have not been able to feel before, or are, it's difficult for you to access, such as self-love, or feeling good enough, feeling worthy. And when you can access that, and IFS really helps you to access that faster than when you're just left by yourself on psychedelics. And so really having that experience, like an embodied experience where you can actually feel it in your body, I think that is like such a big gift. Because then you have that anchor to go towards after the session, right? Because we want to integrate it in daily life. We do these sessions so our daily life improves. But because you now know what it feels like to be worthy of love, or to be worthy of life, of success, it's easier to access that in a normal state.
Yes, that's beautiful. What a beautiful last words to end on. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And for anyone who's listening, if you would like to go on a psychedelic journey with Melissa, combining the IFS in the ceremonies, you can contact us at the Inner Shift Institute. And Melissa works part-time in Tulum, Mexico, and part-time in Amsterdam. So contact us and we'll let you know where you can find her and where you can book your session. And if you would like to stay connected with us, you can also find us on Instagram on innershift.institute. You can find us on YouTube under Inner Shift Institute, and TikTok and Facebook. We are everywhere. And yeah, stay tuned for more interesting conversations of our podcast. And to you, Melissa, I want to say a big thank you for sharing about yourself and your work. And thank you for, being part of our team.
Thank you so much. It's been really lovely. And I love working on this team.
Thank you for listening to the Shift Within podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe for more insightful conversations. Keep asking, keep understanding, keep shifting within, and see you next time in the next episode.